will get emails from our quartermaster, who will remind us to make sure that we get our winter weather uniforms ready in order. If we need any long sleeves or turtlenecks, maybe winter pants, the sweaters, they will call us, send us that email ahead of time to make sure that we get that stuff ready and it's ready for the. Typically what we'll do is we'll go to a modified shift where we will go to a modified response. So we'll do 12-hour shifts. Some of the officers, most of our officers live outside of the city, and so we will make sure that they get housing and food, and we'll rotate into a 12-hour shift to make sure that our officers are prepared for that storm when we get full coverage. Don't go out on the roads unless you have to. I would say to make sure that you travel slowly. If you have four-wheel drive, go ahead and use it. If you have front-wheel drive, go ahead and use that as well. And just essentially make sure that you're very careful. We learned to make sure that we're prepared, and with preparedness comes a benefit of knowing what happened there in the past. And so we want to make sure that City Yard is aware of that as well, and that we get the roads we get the roads salted for the ice. Make sure that you bundle up, first of all. When you're driving to some place, make sure that you got a blanket, extra blanket in the car if you can. Perhaps a flashlight in case it's during the evening times, because you might be out a little bit longer and drive time wise.
We work 24 hours a day. We have 2 shifts that work 12 hours at a time. So there's a daytime shift that's on from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and then a nighttime shift that starts at 8 p.m. and goes until the next morning at 8 a.m. Goal is to clear roads so that traffic can get moving again within 48 hours after a storm ends. And in many cases, we're able to get to roads quicker than that. And in most cases, I would say, we begin working on the interstates and then work on primary highways, which are those that are numbered under 600. So, for instance, Route 29, Route 250, Route 20, Route 22, Route 6 would all be examples of primary roads, and those are cleared first. And then we begin working on secondary roads, which are numbered 600 and above. And finally, we work on subdivisions. And the reason we go in that order is that interstates and primary highways are used by more people. And so if we can clear those first, then more people can get out and do what they need to do. Subdivision streets, of course, would have the fewest people living on them, usually a dozen or so, sometimes more families that live on those. So we work on those last. Site called 511virginia.org, and that's a system that we use, the input data behind the scenes, and it is displayed there in text views as well as on a map. And there is a 511 app that you can download on iPhone and Android that will provide you information on weather conditions. And VDOT is also on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is a statewide account, so the information there is not going to be as detailed. As you've seen, each district at VDOT has their own Twitter account. So here in our area, it's VADOT Culp, which is for the Culpeper District. I advise that people prepare for winter. Make sure you have an emergency kit in your vehicle in case you were to get stranded, and this could include things like blankets and warm clothes, water and food, flashlight, a scraper for your car windows, and a shovel. And we also just advise that you familiarize yourself with the 511 Virginia website and the app, and know where to look for information. And also, if your workplace or school system has a phone number that you can call to find out whether school or work is closed that day, or if you're figure out how to get that information so that you don't leave home when there's bad weather when you don't need to.
Well, there are a lot of things we do. We first try and prepare in advance, and we want to make sure that the community is prepared in advance too. We have officers with all-wheel vehicles, and so they prepare. There are a couple who have chainsaws if there's a tree that would fall and block a road. I think we have 3 chainsaws and officers who are prepared with safety and equipment and are prepared to use those chainsaws to make sure they can get a road clear if they have to, or get to someone in an emergency. So we really make sure that the officers are prepared and then do our part to help the community. Right, so if there is a major storm, you know, it's challenging for the officers just like it's challenging for everyone else on the roadway. So we have what's called a modified response. And when we go to modified response, that means our officers are only responding to those most severe top priority calls, because a lot of times in a severe weather, we'll have a lot of sort of fender benders or a car that just kind of slides off the road. And unfortunately, when the weather is that severe, officers just aren't able to respond to every single incident. So they go where someone is injured, where someone is, you know, in a severe situation, and that's the modified response.
First and important, make sure they have enough gas to get to where they're going to go. Warm weather, coats, blankets in case they get stranded, maybe a couple snacks, batteries, a flashlight, your basic safety equipment.
Well, when something like that happens, we really want to make sure that we communicate well with the community so they know, because certainly we want people to be prepared when there is a major closure, and that's certainly a major road in our community. So we want to communicate that with people. The traffic unit does a great job. They get out and direct traffic and point people, you know, to alternate routes. But you know, sometimes those things happen, and we can't. They can't be avoided. If there's a crash, if there's an incident on a road, we have to close down the road for the safety of everyone. And we ask for people to be patient, and we try and communicate that message and make sure people are aware of what's going on.
Right. If you do get stranded in the roadway and a snowplow cannot clear the roadway, then yes, we do have to move that car so we can get the road reopened. So yes, the car will be towed if it's left in the roadway and the snowplow cannot get through.
And so what we would really ask people to do, because that does happen, and what we really want people to do is prepare in advance. We hope that you're not traveling, you know, in these most severe times during a storm, but you're able to get home, and if you don't have to, the best advice is just to stay off the roadways. And so sometimes these storms hit pretty quickly and people are on their way home and they do get stranded, and we certainly understand that, but the plows have to clear the road. But we would encourage people to stay home if possible.
So, like, during a snowstorm, what kind of shifts does the whole department do as during the storm?
Well, we really sometimes have all hands on deck. You know, we have we have a daylight shift, an evening shift, and a midnight. So they are always working, you know, regardless of what time of day it is, there are officers who are always working. And, you know, if it's severe weather and there are a lot of calls for service and we're very, very busy, then sometimes officers will come in early or they'll stay later to kind of help each other throughout the day. So a lot of times we will have, you know, our SROs, school resource officers, when school's closed, they come in and help out. We have other officers who typically handle different things that are out kind of helping in these severe weather incidents.
Which, like, when tree power lines are on the road, should they avoid that part of the road?
Sure, Officer Litton, you want to take that one?
Yeah, never cross a roadway or drive over down power lines because they can be charged and it can be dangerous.
Yeah, we would love for the students here to follow us on Twitter. We really try and put out different messages, safety tips, information about what the department's doing. We put out a lot of traffic information, a lot of safety tips. You know, there are a lot of things to do to prepare for winter weather driving. Make sure your lights are on, make sure you slow down, that you have more distance between the car in front of you so you don't end up hitting that vehicle. So we put those tips out on social media, and we would love for you to follow us at Albemarle PD. Is that right? At Albemarle CO, Albemarle County, Albemarle CO PD.
Right.
You can find us on Twitter.
For the most part, when it comes to inclement weather, is really sort of at a different level than making the direct decisions on a daily basis as to whether to close school for inclement weather. I work more at the policy level, and so what I'll do is a lot of work around the calendar, for example, and trying to work with the school board to arrive at a good school calendar so that we have makeup days built in, and also helping to set the parameters for the decision and having the conversations with Mr. Tisdat and the superintendent so that when the decision time comes, everything's laid out clearly as to what the ramifications are for everyone.
So will we ever, again, we're going out June 8th or 9th this year.
Yes.
So will that ever happen in the following years? Ever get out so early compared to last year's winter?
Yes. In fact, what we did is when we went back to the calendar last year and asked the school board to take a second look at this year's calendar, and we built in the 5 days, and we said, we have those 5 days that you can make up, and then after that, we're just going to use the amount of time that we bank based on the length of our school day. I think that it's going to work so well that that's the calendar that they'll always use.
So compared to last year, how many days did we miss last year?
Last year we missed 11 days.
With like,
And so the way it works is, the first 5 that you miss, you have to make up those days one after the other. This is based on state guidelines. Then every other one after that you make up. So if you miss 10 days, you're only going to make up 7 to 8 of those days. And then then actually when you go further out, you're forgiven the next 5 days, and then you start to make them up.
so like so if we're under a state emergency, do we have to make up those days that we missed if we're under a state emergency?
Well, that's interesting because there is a policy at the state level where they're supposed to grant relief if you apply for a waiver and say we were under a state emergency during the time that we were closed, so will you please let us not make up those days? And I contacted the State Department about that last year. But you really have to be able to demonstrate that you have gone to a lot of extreme lengths to make up time before they'll waive any of your time. So, for example, things like coming to school on a Saturday, adding time to every single school day so you can build it up. Even last year, Virginia Beach did a lot of those things to try to make up the time, and then they applied for a waiver, and they still weren't granted the waiver. So we hadn't really done anything, and we were asked, I called just to say, can we get this waiver? And the person I talked to in policy said, don't waste your time. Because you actually have to go to the state school board and present and say, can we get this? So it wouldn't have been worth it.
Yeah. So like, for example, last year, was it like hard to schedule the makeup days since we missed those 11 days?
It wasn't hard. It was painful, I think, for everybody because, as those last days kind of drag out, it's getting warmer outside. People were planning, they have vacations that they plan. There are a lot of ramifications for families when you just keep pushing the school days out farther. And the other piece is that people begin to wonder, what are we doing here at the school level? Now, I do think teachers do the best they can to extend the curriculum and give kids learning opportunities. But people do say, well, why do we continue to make up these days?
So like, I heard last year that you were trying to consider Saturday school. What stopped you from making that decision?
Well, what we did, Jack, is we went ahead and put out a survey. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And just said, here are some things the school board is thinking about as possibilities. And the one with Saturday school, I mean, that was a failure. People just voted it down in the survey pretty quickly. And as a teacher, I taught in Virginia Beach, and there were a couple times where we were teaching on Saturdays, and about half the students show up, if that.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what time does that, like, do you fall under what time it gets, like, updated and stuff?
Let's see. We usually have the decision made, if we're making it in the morning, we'll make the decision, I think we make it by 6 o'clock, and then all that stuff starts to roll. And so I would say typically by 6:30, it ought to be posted by then.
What's your winter predictions for this coming winter?
My winter prediction, for some reason, I think we're going to keep seeing the wintertime start, like the cold weather and the snow start a little later every year.
Yeah.
I don't know why I think that, because that's what's been happening. And then finish later. So I think we're going to have a relatively snow-free up until around the winter holidays, and then it's going to start to snow.
Biggest thing when you're shoveling snow, make sure that someone knows where you are and someone's checking up. The biggest tragedy that we see with that is people go out to shovel snow, they collapse, and no one knows they're there. And if we had gotten an alert earlier, we may have been able to intervene and help them. So you want to make sure that you have a gallon of water per person for at least 3 days. I would plan for a week. That way you know you have plenty of water. Typically it's auto accidents, people sliding off the road. And that's part of our modified response. So one of the things that we do is we mark those vehicles with fire line tape so we know the vehicle was checked. Because what we learned is that people drive by, see the car run off the road, And if it isn't marked, there's no way to know that we checked it. So we were checking on the same car 4 and 5 times.